Hey everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. It's been a busy week as I came back to work after being sick, but thankfully this week I will have a little bit more time, so more videos are coming for you this week. Stay tuned and subscribe. What's happening right now at the front line is exactly what I've told you last week and a week before, and explaining to you that everyone that just cried wolf and said, oh my god, Avdiivka has been taken by Russia, Russia is totally winning, Ukrainian front lines are collapsing. In reality, I said to you this, that after Avdiivka, Ukrainians have built defensive positions, and even last time I showed you them, if you should watch my videos where I show the pictures of this. But the defensive line that Ukrainians have built goes along these couple of bodies of water, and in between there is a creek that runs through it. And Ukrainians have used this position to fall back their main forces, whereas the positions that Russia gained in the last couple of weeks were mostly, as Ukrainians were falling back, they were leaving the positions that was harder to defend. So it was expected that these positions would actually be taken by Russians. More importantly, as the same as everything else has been going on in this war, Russian tempo of advances is actually slower than certain pessimistic scenarios that were drawn. There were a couple of analysts that said, well, actually, we would expect Russia to have captured all of this area already by the start of the last week. Not even where now, but even beforehand. And we now are hearing reports that Ukrainians are stabilizing the front line around this network that I explained to you. And we're hearing that while there are still battles around Tonyinke, for example, this week, there has been reports of Ukrainians actually doing a little bit of a counterattack around Tonyinke, and for a while even throwing Russians out a bit, well, with Russians later coming back. But the point still stands that Ukrainian front lines have not collapsed. They're not collapsing. Ukraine is a very dire position. They are really saying that they need resources, they need ammunition, and that's why they're falling back. But all in all, Ukrainians are still doing a great job. Whatever Russia is gaining, firstly, it's not much, and secondly, it's not easy. More importantly, after I explained last week, because beforehand everyone was just panicking and saying Ukraine has no defenses whatsoever, and I just had to explain that that's not true. It seems that finally media kind of caught up with the ideas like, oh, wow, yeah, there were actually Ukrainian defensive lines a little bit better, a little bit behind the positions where the fighting was happening. So people just didn't look at the map and didn't realize it. And finally, we see the articles in media appearing saying, hey, you know, like there's this trench networks, like there's like these dragon teeth networks of trenches and so on that are appearing on the Ukrainian positions. Moreover, even Russian Telegram channels have started showing pictures. Yeah, you know, kind of like saying that Ukrainians don't really have defensive lines on the front line is, that's a little bit of a, that's not true. It's just a lie. And even Russian Telegram channels are posting pictures. This is actually from the Zaporizhia front line from the south, saying that no, Ukrainians actually are building very extensive defensive lines all across the front line in Ukraine. So long story short, with the fall of Avdiivka, not much has changed for Russia. They got a propaganda victory. They got it for over half a year, sacrificing countless amounts of resources and troops. Just today, there was like, oh my God, there is this tank that we destroyed. There is another Abrams that is destroyed. Guys, this is war, like a full-scale war. Everything burns. There is no wonder weapon equipment that is not damageable, not destructible, and so on. Everything burns. The question is, what is your coefficient of using that equipment? One of the major news just recently is that Russians have actually were able to strike and destroy from 1 to 3 Patriot launchers. It supposedly is that migrating Patriot that was wreaking havoc on the Russian aviation just recently. So Russians, since then, they scrambled their drones everywhere, trying to find where is that Patriot launcher, and they were finally able to find and strike it. Why? Well, now we have some people again in pro-Ukrainian community crying, "Oh my God, why would Ukraine bring a Patriot launcher so close to the front line?" Apparently, by the video that Russians published, the Patriot launchers were struck about 40 kilometers from the front line. And the answer is very simple: because Ukraine needs to take more risks. Ukraine doesn't have enough ammunition, weapons, anti-air defenses. Planes are still not operational as much as I would want. And I was hoping that it was F-16s that were striking down Russian targets. No, it turns out it was not. And Ukrainians were taking risks, and those risks, I would not say they didn't pay off. 3 Patriot launchers destroyed, fair enough. But Ukrainians in total destroyed, what, over 20 Russian planes? That's incredible return on investment, I think, without even counting how much work the other Patriot missiles elements did. And it was only 3 launchers. The other parts of the Patriot elements are still operational. So the launchers are actually somewhat considered the cheaper side of that system. So all in all, what we need to understand, everything burns in this war. There is no indestructible equipment. Whenever Russians or pro-Russian shills are going to start telling you, oh my God, you are losing Abrams tanks, you're losing Patriot missiles, whatever. Yeah, how many T-90 tanks there are already burned? I believe it's like in hundreds we're talking about already right now. The supposedly indestructible Armata was only never destroyed in Russia, in Ukraine. Why? Because it never made it to Ukraine, because it was so shit that it never even made it past the border. Probably it broke down somewhere on the gas station in Rostov. But Ukrainians have actually continuing to be on the offensive as much as they can with the resources that they have. And they've launched quite well, it's unclear if it's fully successful or not, so I'm going to hold my horses, but they definitely launched a massive drone strike against this aviation repair centers here in Taganrog just recently. And Tatarigami's team, which is an ex-Ukrainian military that is now having this analytics team where they analyze military intelligence data and are using satellite images, they've analyzed the strikes against this facility right over here. So in this facility, a hangar that houses planes have been struck. What the Tarigami has deducted here, that a couple of days ago, if you look close enough, you actually see with the orange marker, that is a Russian A-50 plane that is landed in this area. And it is expected that it was taken into the hangar after that. So the running kind of idea is, because we haven't seen A-50 in the air, the A-50 is like an analog of AVAX, like a long-range radar plane that finds out long-range all of the flying objects in the sky. That because Ukrainians have taken down majority of the A-50s, okay, a little bit of a go back. So Russia has in total about 13 planes of A-50 type that they had post-Soviet Union. However, in the past couple of years, they were able to fly something around 5 of them in total. So only 5 was able to be lifted in the air. Pictures about the rest of them showed them to be in relatively bad state. So they were rusted, they were definitely standing for a long time on the runways, and they were not being utilized. So after Russia started losing these A-50 planes, the question became very, very relevant as to how many of these planes do they actually have left that are operational and can be utilized. And it seems that this plane right here was either damaged, or it was another kind of A-50 plane that Russia is trying to get and assemble together. So they're trying to either cannibalize parts from other planes or use some kind of repair equipment that is potentially in this base. So with Ukrainians going additionally after Russian A-50 plane is just underlines the continuous Ukrainian effort to make sure that whenever F-16s appear on the front line, Russia will not have as much anti-air defenses, and Russia will have as least as possible early warning notification systems, which is very, very good, and it's only commendable that Ukraine continues the work in this area. Also, something that a friend of the channel also asked me to do, it's from people in Czechia. So this is my Czech friend here. He sent me the link to this petition. It's a petition about, I think it's mostly for Czech, but I believe all Europeans can sign it. So you can sign this petition. I'm going to link it in a description of the video, where we call on the European leaders to do more for Ukraine and to make sure that we as European citizens and EU citizens, we express our support for Ukraine. I think it's a nice positive gesture just to kind of keep up, and before we get into the actual support for Ukraine with new fundraising and everything. So really good thing. Please, please do follow up on this. And to kind of polish it all off, you know, just recently, people like from the MAGA camp, the absolute cultists of Trump that absolutely disregard whatever he does and whatever he says, recently met with the absolute dog shit of a person, the Hungarian dictator Orban, and obviously Trump, by being the alpha male that he is, completely licked the boots of this Hungarian dictator, eating from his teaspoon and drinking off his titty milks. So Trump here was having an invitation for Orban inside of his residence at Mar-a-Lago, where he expressed his eternal love to being a dictator. This is what Trump wants for America. He wants to Hungarize US. He wants to turn America from a democracy to autocracy. We already saw this happening in Hungary, so I never wish my US friends like this. And to kind of polish this thing off, Orban after that came on the M1, I believe it was called, either TV or radio, and he actually talked about this discussion that they had with Trump. And he explained the plan that Trump had for Ukraine to Orban. And the plan is, I think it's going to be the worst kept secret of all times, like, because we all heard that Trump said, oh my God, I'm going to totally solve the Ukraine crisis in one day. Well, the way that he's proposing to solve the crisis is stop giving Ukraine money, and essentially Ukrainians will be forced to then get to negotiating table with Putin. That is his plan. He's very happy about it. What a shocker of a plan it is. Absolute garbage of a human being. Fuck him, fuck Trump, fuck Orban, fuck all of them. Love Ukraine, Slava Ukraini. I love you guys, and I'll see you next time.